Association of Indiana help us ensure everyone in Indiana has the opportunity to live longer, healthier lives. On tonight's Living by Design, it's the fifth and final episode of our COVID series. Kathy Holloway Hill sits down with Chriselia Patterson.
So can you imagine kids going back and forth into quarantine?
Tonight on Living by Design. Living by Design with host Kathy Holloway Hill. Kathy is a strong, powerful voice. She entertains, informs, and inspires her audiences everywhere she goes.
Hello and welcome to the Living by Design show. I am Kathy Holloway Hill and we are here with another episode of our COVID series. And today we have an incredible guest by the name of Miss Chriselia Patterson. And she is going to talk to us about her personal experience with this virus. Chriselia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I am very, very happy to have you because you're going to talk to us about the real nitty gritty.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're going to talk about today is COVID and your personal experience. So just tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we're going to get into the COVID piece of it.
You know, I am a single mom. I relocated back to my home of Evansville, Indiana, about 9 years ago. And at that time when I relocated, I was married, and I actually went through a divorce right during COVID. So when we went into quarantine, I literally went into a divorce process. So that's a story in itself. So as a result of that, you can imagine there was a lot of things that I had going on, transitioning out of a home, 4 children, wrapping around my children, going into quarantine. My work requires that I keep my finger on the pulse of what is happening in the mental health world, what's happening in health disparity, and the medically underserved community. And I have to stay abreast of all of that that's going on. And on top of that, a pandemic hit, and my life is spiraling out of control in itself. And so much transitioning is going on that's unimaginable to a human being. And a lot of people were not aware of what I was personally going through. So there's a lot of little bitty stories, but as far as the COVID, I definitely have a lot to share of someone who was apprehensive, someone where COVID came to my doorstep and knocked on that door, and someone who was just overwhelmed with an abundance of information and that had to make some critical decisions for myself, for my children, and for my parents and those that I was coming in contact with.
Well, that's exactly why you're here today, because we've been doing this series, and I'm so excited about this series because it's really critical that we get this really out to everyone, because a lot of people are not taking this virus seriously, and they're doing things that just really need to stop. So just go ahead and tell us about your personal experience and who in your family had COVID and how did it come about.
Well, my 17-year-old daughter, who was only 16 at the time, she literally, it's 4 of her and her friends. And the night before, her friends were over there. I was already in a panic and a tizzy about anyone coming to the house. And so these teenagers were really struggling with kind of where to go. I was at home that was kind of trying to provide them food to let them eat in the car. They were not homeless. They were not couch surfers, but they were kids that were just struggling. Like, where do we go? They were floating. They were in quarantine. They weren't in school. But I felt that it was necessary that I did try to somehow keep some communication line open to the other three outside of my child, because I could see they were starving for some type of conversation. And that night, one of the teenagers was sweating profusely. Literally, it did not dawn on me. I knew all the signs and symptoms and warnings. I thought he was dehydrated. He thought he was hungry. When I say he was sweating profusely, water was dripping from his head. COVID never entered into my head, never entered into anyone's head, all of us that were standing there. It was all four of my children, him and her friends. Within 24 hours, he tested positive for COVID. Well, I had no idea. We already know, just because he wasn't feeling that he had already had an appointment. We didn't even know that he had an appointment. Within 48 hours, all the other three students tested positive for COVID.
So was this early on in the pandemic?
This happened around maybe November.
Okay.
So that so then I'm then frantic because my whole mindset. Remember, I'm a person that my emails are constantly flooded with what's coming in from the FDA, what's coming in the medical field, because I'm in a business that I'm with the Area Health Education Center. We're either housed in universities or hospitals. And our sole purpose is to recruit, train, and educate future healthcare professionals. So that means I'm always about what's happening in the medical field. So that means I'm getting flooded with information daily about this regarding the COVID. So I'm literally watching this information. I have a child now that's sick, and in my mind, I'm constantly always thinking, I cannot afford to get sick, even though they have their father, but still I'm their mom who's recently been divorced, and I feel that I have to stay well. I cannot go down. So I'm dealing with that guilt. I should have recognized it. I should have known, but then I had to go get tested. Then I was concerned about the other three. A lot of people didn't know. My daughter had open heart surgery at 9. And so but many people knew from various states, because I had prayer vigils for my daughter. My daughter was born at 28 weeks. She was born weighing 1 pound and 10 ounces.
So your other three children tested negative, and so did you?
Yes.
Excellent. That's great.
Negative, which was a surprise.
So you had one daughter who did test positive, and those are her friends.
Right. Now, mind you, she tested positive 2 to 3 weeks after her father tested positive. So they go to our home. They rotate every other week. So we were dealing with that. So when he tested positive, they went into quarantine. When she went into tested positive, they went back into quarantine. So can you imagine kids going back and forth into quarantine, in school going back and forth? That is, again, another discussion of how it started to hit their mental health and the information of what they started to communicate to me as a mother, not what I was observing, but what they started to say of how it was affecting them. A 17-year-old, twins that are 13, and 11-year-old, what they started to say.
Right. So did you have the 17-year-old, once she tested positive, did you have her quarantined by herself?
Yeah, she did quarantine. She quarantined. She was then to transition back to her dad. And so she was between the two. She stayed with me. Then she went back to him and quarantined, because I was trying to keep it on that kind of that schedule. It was getting a little iffy. Again, it's newly divorced, trying to share co-parenting. It's crazy.
So let me just stop you right there. We're going to just take a quick break, and as you can see, we've got a lot to unpack here, so we're going to be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are here with Miss Kersilia Patterson. So, Kersilia, let's talk a little bit about your daughter. And once you discovered that she had tested positive, when did she started showing symptoms?
Well, She started showing symptoms within 24 to 48 hours of her friend testing positive. So it was very easy for me to be able to identify. I knew exactly where she went. I knew where they all went. So when it was time to report that information to the CDC, to our health department, that's why it was so important that people were aware of their body. They knew where they went. They knew who they were around. All of that was easy for me to do. She did lose her sense of taste, smell. She lost body ache. She was extremely fatigued. She slept a lot. She was not eating, and she is a hearty eater. She was walking the dog. She would wear a mask, and she told me, and it broke my heart when she said she was trying to walk our German Shepherd, and we have two dogs, a Chihuahua and a German Shepherd, and she had to sit down because she couldn't make it. And it just crushed my heart, for my daughter to say that to me. And so many people didn't understand that when she had the holes in her heart, which is not the proper medical term, it was a godsend how we recognized it, but really, it was really a routine checkup to go to the dentist. And by simply not identifying on there what the final steps were that I took from her initial birth of those hearts not closing from being born at 28 weeks and 1 pound and 10 ounces, they refused to clean her teeth. And as a result of that, we went back to the specialist, found out the holes not only didn't close, they were much larger than they were when she was born. And so as a result of that, there was later on scheduled open heart, which was done differently, but still it was classified as an open heart surgery. So for me, in my mind, when that hit, every 2 to 3 years, she does have to, have certain testing and monitors done on her heart because of devices that they put in there to close her heart. Again, there's many things that people aren't aware of because you don't want your child treated a different way. You want them to have a fair chance at a game and a sport, a fair chance in a class, and you don't want them to be looked at any differently because of how they came into this world.
Right.
Type of surgeries that they've had. So I've never stood on a corner and hollered out with a bullhorn, but if it comes up, I have no problem sharing. But in my mind, I knew what the situation was with my daughter's heart, and I was concerned that was going to affect her heart. And I'm also still concerned. I lean on my faith to help me, but there's also a reality too. God gives me wisdom, but I also do have some concern based on what I've studied, and this is new to all of us in this world. Could be dealing with some long-term effects in regards to her heart because of how hard it hit her with the fatigue and the struggle for her to bounce back. Now, she didn't struggle as hard as her friend who ended up in the hospital, but her friend didn't have heart conditions either. He had asthma, so it was affecting them all differently.
So did your daughter experience any issues with her heart as a result of the COVID illness?
Well, as of now, we don't know. It happened in November of 2020. And so now with this being April 2021, she's scheduled to go to her specialist. And that's when she's sent home for 24 hours with her, EKG and monitor, and they'll monitor the rhythm. And then there will be certain x-rays, various things that are done to make sure that the material that they use to close up those holes, that they haven't moved around, that there hasn't been any type of shifting. We'll look at it then, and they will check those valves. So that's when we'll see this year. And so we're just going to be prayerful, just be prayerful about it, and I'm not sitting around biting my nails, but I also am being realistic too, that, that was very serious. And so when individuals were taking that lightly, and I was literally watching people that I knew that watched me grow up pass away, literally in my own city. And so for every friend that I had in every state, they knew someone that passed away. So from North Carolina to Kentucky to Indiana, Tennessee, you name it. I knew people in multiple states, and they lost a loved one to COVID. So I never could quite wrap my head around individuals that saw this happening around the world, and I couldn't understand the rationale of how did people draw a conclusion that they didn't feel the need necessarily to protect themselves or to wear that mask, at least not to be a spreader. So I think that I just kind of really wanted to sit down with some people. Some people I did sit down with that were really kind of aloof to it. And just kind of say, now explain to me, why was it you felt that you're a bus driver for a school and you're going to refuse to wear the mask? Well, in that case, that person couldn't because it was mandated by their job. But that I had to think this was reality, that there was someone I knew in our school system that was adamant they were not going to wear the mask. But fortunately for us, that the school corporation mandated it, and that was the only saving grace, was that it was required for their job or they were not going to wear the mask. And that's what was scary.
Now, if I remember correctly, back in November, school was still virtual, right?
Yeah, well, it was now. So it was different for us. And I can't quite remember because it was a little ping-pongy back and forth. So for us, we transitioned back, and we transitioned back according to your name. So there was 1 week of transition, then another week, until they transitioned all the students back. So I have to commend our school system, our teacher. I believed that they took all the precautions that they could to try to protect everyone involved. That's what I have to say. I am a person that's very involved in our school system, and I was very concerned for our teachers and our administration because they had children as well. We have to remember, it wasn't just a year of them trying to prepare for them. I sat on board meetings and Zoom calls and listened to their strategic plans. They had years of planning for this. It wasn't called COVID. It was years of planning of an outbreak.
Right.
Just an outbreak. And so for me, I am part of building a summer program that teaches students what happens if an outbreak occurs. Who would have thought that I've partnered for the last several years with the CDC, with an epidemiologist, and with a local high school teacher that we do simulated outbreaks for our city.
Right.
And I'm literally living it.
And just hold that thought. We're going to come right back to that. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We are still here with our COVID series and our guest today. So, Miss Crescelia, just, talk to us a little bit more about what you were saying right before the break, that you said you sit on a committee that was preparing for this virus. So you kind of had an idea it was coming, didn't know it was COVID, but it was a pandemic type of virus.
Well, what it is that I sat in on Zoom calls with the school board. So what we call it here in Evansville, it's called EVSC, which is the Evansville Vanderburgh School Corporation Big Table. And the Big Table is anyone that is in the business of coordinating, collaborating, and assisting the school corporation gathers initially in a huge conference room, and you would share out what you were doing as an organization or a business to help the school corporation. And so we were able to hear how the school had been planning for years. They didn't know it was called COVID. So I have to commend them. They had no idea it was called COVID, but what the school had been preparing for 20 years, the representative said, was an outbreak.
Yeah.
So that's what folks have to understand. They were like, we didn't just start planning for this. We've been planning what if an outbreak ever occurred in our school system. We've always known, our administration have talked about it, our CDC's talked about, we've had enough stuff to hit the United States and to hit this world. Not at this level, but we've had enough things that have warned us of the possibility that it could be global. I've been able to, for the last several years, never knowing, I've partnered with the school corporation as a part of my job, and we developed and we modeled it after the CDC in Atlanta. And we modeled a simulated outbreak that we call Go Viral, Be a Disease Detective. And we teach students what happens if a pandemic hits our city. And we teach them to find out what the disease is, who was the host, how to do a PSA. All of this is hosted on our website. We use real students. We use real simulation medical rooms. We partner with a high school. We use 8th and 9th graders. Never in a million years would we have thought that we would be living this. But what we were teaching those students is literally in a simulation actually happened. Yep. So there is a part of my heart that is full because we have trained an abundant students over the years of washing their hands and how to prepare for an outbreak. We literally, truly, we grew diseases and cultures. We grew them in labs. We brought in experts from the CDC. We had real experts to them. We have an epidemiologist from the University of Southern Indiana. We had a health science teacher every year that would partner with us from the Southern Indiana School of Technology, Career and Technical Center. And so this has happened. And our organization, the Area Health Education Center, funds this. And we have students coming from the tri-state. And we actually prepared them for this. And so that's why it's vital that programs like us continue to be funded, because they lived what we were preparing them for. We never knew this, but we were preparing them because enough outbreaks had happened. The Zika virus and the Ebola and various things happen. And we talk about all of that. We talk about global outbreaks. Wow. And we teach them about public health. And we do
we've had outbreaks because we had H1N1, we've had swine flu, we've had outbreaks.
Talk about all of those. Yep. We teach them about all of those.
Yep.
Yep. So now this is another one we'll add, but now guess what? They've actually lived it. We had to simulate it for them. Like what's happening now, we were able to create a simulation. Now they actually lived it.
So what about the vaccines? How does that fit into the model?
I was a person that was apprehensive about the vaccination.
Right.
Even though I was reading the statistics, even though I have an epidemiologist down the hall, I'm reading studies and cases, I'm friends with doctors, but I had to educate myself. I couldn't buy into the rhetoric that I was seeing on Facebook. I had to research it and look it up for myself. I had to ask questions. I sat on panels with doctors and I talked about it. We have recordings that we did with the NAACP to discuss, what happens when there's biases in medicine? What happens when our Black and Brown communities are apprehensive about medicine? And so I did that to educate myself and to educate my community, to say, I researched it. I went to those that had the information and I made the best decision that I thought to be for myself and for my family. And then we shared it with the community. And at the end of the day, all we can do is bring you the information. And then it is up to you to make the best decision that you believe for your family. And no one should pressure anyone. All you can do is lay it at their feet. And they have to make the best decision, because we know historically individuals from Black and Brown communities are apprehensive about medicine being part of research. We do understand that, but we also have to remind individuals from the Black and Brown communities. That's why there were HIPAA guidelines and ethical guidelines put in place to safeguard communities so that history does not repeat itself.
So if someone wanted to find out about your organization, what is your website? If someone lives in Evansville or anywhere in Indiana?
Anywhere, yeah. They can go to the University of Southern Indiana, and type in the University of Southern Indiana. And then if they want to go to the search box, they can type in Area Health Education Center. It'll take you right to our link, or they can type in AHEC. It'll take you right to our link. Or if individuals have emails from me, I have hyperlinks at the bottom of all my email addresses, which is the letter K, Patterson, KPATTERSON @usi.edu. We are easy to find in Southwest Indiana Area Health Education Center. We are located throughout Indiana. We are in all throughout the nation, and our furthest location that I hope to get to one day is Hawaii.
Well, I tell you, you have really been a wealth of knowledge, Ms. Patterson. And
Thank you.
we thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and knowledge and just your personal journey with us. And we really hope you have enjoyed, or at least found some value in all of our COVID series. So we thank you for joining us for this episode and all of our episodes. And we're going to sign off for now, and we'll see you the same time next week for another empowering episode of the Living by Design show. Good night, everyone.